I had to stand in this authentic power, and I had to remember who I was without this conditioning. And that person does deserve a lot. That person can create their own reality. That person can put themselves out there and be something. And when I sat in this, I started realizing all the areas of my life that I felt so much more lit up and passionate about. I felt this sense of relief that I am in control and I actually can create my own reality. Welcome to the Authentic Way podcast. Today's episode 2, which I'm really excited about. We get to do a deep dive into awareness and releasing. Today we get to look at all these patterns that might be having an effect on us or making decisions for us that we didn't even know were running the show. We get to look at conditioning and these stories and narratives that we might have about ourselves and how we can start making more decisions from the heart that are in alignment. This phase can be very intense. It really helps define who you actually are. It's a bit of an overhaul of all these stories that you might be living with and finding out where you're living for other people and not yourself because of societal expectations or these stories that our parents told us or our education system. It can smack you right in the face. And I say that because it is quite the experience when you realize that you have been living in someone else's truth. There's this underlying feeling that is always there that something isn't quite right, or that you're constantly reaching for something more, or think, if I make this decision to do this small thing, then I'll be happy. It's that we keep grasping for something that is going to change our happiness or our fulfillment in life. But every time we reach those decisions or get the new job or get the new partner, something is still always missing. In the awareness phase, we get to have a deep look at the conditioning and how it creates blocks in our nervous system and how we're showing up every day. It gives a good perspective of how we might be standing in our own way and not even knowing it. A lot of the conditioning that's created through blocks is stemming from our nervous system that was conditioned from a very young age. A block isn't necessarily resistance towards something, but it's a protection, and it's keeping you safe, whether it feels like it or not. It's not about laziness or lack of doing or fears of success or failure. It's actually your body keeping you safe from what it thinks is like risky or unknown. And that comes from the messages and rules that were absorbed basically from society, family, culture growing up. Blocks can show up by feeling kind of like a resistance or hesitation to do something that we actually want. But really, it's just your nervous system protecting you from uncertainty. And the uncertainty often comes from breaking the rules that we were taught from a very young age. And the nervous system, whether or not it feels like it is doing its job when it's blocking us. And that's just what makes us human. And this process is really about trying to navigate being human and regulating our nervous system in a way that we are able to not necessarily act from that place, but more witness actually what's going on in our body and making a decision that does feel in alignment, but also feeling safe. Because making decisions that do feel authentic and safe feel a lot more approachable than not. So your nervous system has one job, and that's to keep you alive and safe. It doesn't actually care about your goals or your ambitions, your vision board, or what you want to do with this year. It only notices safety and familiarity. Anything outside of that is a risk. So if you're thinking about leaving your 9 to 5 job to start a side project, you might notice that there's an anxiety coming up from your body, and you might start feeling it in your stomach or in your solar plexus. Or you could be considering asking for a raise at work, and suddenly you feel exhausted and anxious and not worthy. When you imagine quitting a predictable path to pursue something creative, your mind will start flooding with reasons not to. And that's your nervous system kicking in. The nervous system is reading all of that unknown as unsafe. Even though it is what you're yearning for or what you do want, it is firing, and it is going to protect you against something unconventional that doesn't feel good because it's unknown. It's not predictable, and our bodies love predictability. So through this conditioning, our blocks tend to form when your body learns that certain actions lead to discomfort or embarrassment, judgment, and over time it creates this automatic protective response. So this may have looked like this as a kid, and maybe you're wanting to stand up in front of the class and share your idea or respond to a question, try something creative, or even doing a speech. Oh my gosh, I have so much trauma from doing speeches in front of classes. But so when you did this, maybe you got laughed at or ignored or told you did something wrong. This is a signal to your nervous system that being seen can be unsafe. And that is formed as a block in your body because your nervous system remembers that if you put yourself out there, you're going to be laughed at, and it's not safe at all. Maybe as a teenager, you wanted to follow a passion, some music, writing, art, but you were told that won't make me any money. Or you need to focus on something more practical with benefits and something with consistent income. And again, your nervous system has logged that as a risk and has this memory that if you do something with the creative outlet, that you will not be safe. You will not make any money with it. As we grow older, these conditionings that have been placed upon us without even really knowing it, that we did not decide that we wanted, they were given to us. They can be really sneaky, and they can feel like that's who you are. But really, it's a protective pattern that your body learned from the rules you absorbed over time, and that can feel very safe. Sometimes these patterns show up in a way that we don't even know is happening. And this has happened to me when I was working a job, a 9 to 5 job, and I hated it. I was crying every single day. It was awful. And my nervous system was completely wrecked working there. And people would say, maybe it's time that you go get a new job or try something new, apply for this, apply for that. And the response that kept coming up in my body that was really running the show for me that I didn't even know was that the job that I was working was as good as it was going to get for me. And I wasn't worthy of having a better job than that. And this story ran the show for me. Like, it literally, I was convinced of that. This conditioning came when I was a young kid and school was really, really hard for me. And I learned that if you did not go to university or college, that life was probably going to be pretty hard for you and you were going to struggle. No one placed that on me intentionally. Societal expectations did, and they were everywhere. And I'm still trying to unlearn that conditioning. Even though I was experiencing this conditioning that kept showing up, it didn't always feel like an alarm. It felt like my natural state. It felt like that's what it was willing to settle for. They're very subtle, everyday signals can show up through procrastination on things that actually matter to you. They can show up on overthinking a simple decision until it feels impossible, or sudden exhaustion, let's say, when you're about to take a step forward. And you're always kind of leaning towards the safe option, even when it leaves you frustrated, uninspired, bored, hating your life every day. And when that block comes up, it's not a failure. It's your nervous system hitting the emergency brake. It's responding to old rules that it learned by keeping you small so that you wouldn't get hurt. And when you learned those is back when following the rules didn't really matter. So part of you might be thinking that when you're trying to make a decision, like why am I not applying for this job? I just need to be more disciplined. I need to just push through. I just need to override these feelings that I have and just do it. And I've had friends try to make decisions for me and tell me to do things by just overriding that fear and just not really thinking about it and doing it. That can work to a certain degree. However, the body doesn't really respond to logical decisions. The nervous system will always keep if it feels unsafe. Imagine trying to maybe drive a car while the parking brake is on and pressing the gas doesn't really help, but there will always be that resistance there and it's not actually working. And in order to actually successfully make the decision to apply for a job that you might not feel totally worthy of, you do need to actually find safety in the body in order to be able to do this and for it to feel achievable. That's why all this just do it advice fails when there's a block actively happening in your life and it doesn't feel as sustainable to make those decisions from that place. So a lot of the time when it comes to looking at this work and becoming aware of the blocks that might be holding us back, a lot of the time people confuse familiar with safe. So this could look like you're staying in a chaotic job because stress feels productive even if it's draining you, or you're sticking with a path you don't love because struggle feels earned. You could be avoiding a creative business pursuit. Maybe you want to go work for yourself because failure feels risky, even if you know the path makes you miserable. Or even calm, ease, presence, and doing things your own way feels suspicious or uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. This block isn't stopping you from growing, it's actually keeping you in what you already know and what your nervous system recognizes as survival. The discomfort of breaking these old rules triggers it, even when the rules no longer serve you. And again, this showed up when I was working that job, and I had normalized crying every day and feeling awful at work. I literally told myself that that was as good as it's going to get because that's all I knew. The thought of working another job or working for myself was way too scary, so I kept choosing the most uncomfortable path because it was familiar. It was not safe, but my nervous system recognized it as safe because it's all it knew at the time. All it knew was the dysregulation. It was normal for me to cry every day and to come home and to just completely fall asleep on the couch because I was miserable. I had normalized that because the unknown was unpredictable. It was so conditioned in my body that I actually tried to normalize that as a way of life. Once I realized that lifestyle was not sustainable and my life was actually withering, I became so small. I became so unhappy, and all I talked about was work. I actually took about a 2 or 3 week long road trip on Vancouver Island, and I remember sitting on the beaches and I couldn't stop thinking about this job and how much it was ruining me. And for what I was making, I should not have been sitting on a beach thinking about this job. It was horrendous. My nervous system was so broken. That's when I realized that probably not having a job at this point was better than continuing on. So I literally went home and I quit that job immediately and called in sick for the next 2 weeks because my mental health was in shambles. This decision was so scary, but I needed to just trust my gut on it. And I knew that things would naturally unfold the moment that I decided enough is enough. And it took about probably 8 months to get to that point of feeling like that every day. When I was able to release the loop on normalizing that lifestyle and that nervous system response, that's when change became an option. That's when I decided it was time to make a move. And all it took was the awareness piece that this is not in alignment with me. And this is probably someone else's story that I'm living with. And the decision to tell myself that that was the best it was going to get for me was not true. And I'm sure you, even listening to this, would know that that is 100% not true. However, that came from somewhere for me. That came from teachers in high school telling me that if I didn't go to college or university, I was probably going to have a really crappy job that didn't make me very much money, and I would probably not be that happy because I didn't have any movement or I didn't have any options for new career. And education was everything. So through that conditioning that I received at a younger age, I decided that that was true because it's all I knew. I normalized suffering for myself. I normalized that that was just the life I was going to have. Even though none of that is true, when that block became aware to me, I was quite disgusted. And the whole situation all of a sudden became workable. And so once you start recognizing that your blocks are protective and not personal to you, you can actually stop fighting yourself and noticing the way that the conditioning has kept you quite small. The awareness alone begins to release the loop and create space for choice and to create a different path for yourself. So today I kind of wanted to walk you through a little bit of a process around creating awareness where conditioning might be present in your life and that you're not even sure about. So we're going to start with just taking a moment wherever you may be and just kind of taking some natural breaths and just really centering in on yourself. And in this section, we're going to notice the beliefs that you've absorbed and where in your life do you feel is out of alignment? Where feels sticky or hard right now? This could show up in work, in relationships, with friendships, with creative outlets. And if you're able to write this down, go for it. And if not, you can just simply work through it with me. So we're just noticing when it comes to work, let's say, and what doesn't feel good about it right now. Once you're able to identify what's not feeling good, I want you to identify what would feel good for you. I want you to look at what is your reality right now and what it is that you're really wanting and why what you're really wanting feels unachievable. What about it? Is it that it feels scary? Is it that it feels hard to do? Does it feel like others are going to judge you? Does it feel like you don't trust yourself? Maybe it's that artists can't make money, or the stability of the job you have now is more important than the passion that you have. Maybe it's the benefits or the predictable income. List as many that come to mind without questioning it. Now I want you to identify the feelings or emotions that are tied to these beliefs that you have and why you can't get from where you are to where you want to go. So we've identified the reasons why we think we can't, and now I want you to tie an emotion to each of those if there's more than one. Does it make you feel scared? Does it make you feel sad? Does it make you feel worried? Does it make you feel inadequate? Now I want you to write down what you would rather feel and how that is achievable and what story you would rather tell yourself. So maybe it's that you want to be a painter for a living, an artist. And maybe the new story that we want to tell ourselves is a career that you're passionate about leads to happiness. You will be supported if you lead from the heart and do a career that feels way more in alignment. What's the new story? Maybe it's that you're worthy of being in the relationship that you've always wanted. Maybe it's that you're worthy of that love. You feel ready. Now, through this exercise, I want you to really look at the last two answers that we gave and how you are operating from a place of this conditioning. And if you're able to identify that, let's just say that you can't make money as an artist, but you want to. If you have the capacity, and if you don't, that's okay. Think about when you maybe learned that and where that came from. Maybe it was your parents. Maybe they are artists, but always chose the safe career and never got to actually express them, and they carried resentment for it. So they taught that to you. Notice where maybe there was a time that you were taught that you weren't worthy of a relationship and it was better to be single and you'd be more happy if you were single. Notice where these stories start coming up. And sometimes this can take a few days. Once you've created the awareness, it can really take some time for your nervous system to kind of relax in it and for these stories to kind of come up to the surface because they've been buried for so long that we don't even know that they're the ones running the show. The last step, we're going to reflect on some small rewiring steps and choices. And this could look like if you are working an office job right now that has absolutely nothing to do with art, but you are extremely passionate about art and you would love to be an artist for a living. And right now you don't prioritize it because you've been taught that there's really no reason to prioritize art if it doesn't get you anywhere. Maybe those rewiring steps could look like choosing to do a certain amount of hours each week, or choosing to dedicate one day a week to doing your art and talking about it and telling people instead of hiding it, or choosing to sign up for an art show to show people how amazing you are at something. And making small decisions from the new story that you're going to tell yourself and tell others around you to start rewiring that conditioning. Through this process, it can be really beautiful, and you can start realizing where you might be living from other people's conditioning or truth. And when you start releasing all of that, you start coming into alignment bit by bit. This can feel overwhelming because it will all of a sudden feel like you have a lot of work to do and rewiring and creating new identity with the most authentic version of yourself. I definitely felt that way. I remember when I started looking at all the areas in my life that I was having a hard time with and creating a lot of awareness of where these blocks were showing up. I felt like things were completely out of my control, and I had a lot of work to do to come home to myself and a lot of new conditioning and rewiring. I started to realize all the places that I was not living in my truth, and that was really hard because it felt like part of my identity wasn't even real. But when I took the time to really prioritize the areas of my life that I wanted to work on first and slowly rewiring those areas and telling myself a new story and conditioning and creating safety within my body to do those things, it was very manageable and very workable to work through all these different areas and prioritize. And I'm still working on it. There's still areas that I'm trying to figure out what's actually going on in the new story that I want to tell. And it's kind of your life's work, and it will keep showing up, these patterns that we have. Sometimes you think that you've overcome the pattern and that you've created this new story, but in reality, this pattern's going to take over because of old conditioning. And it is hard to completely abolish those patterns. They will show up and they're going to be pesky, and every time that they show up, you get to make the most aligned decision for yourself to either listen to it or to not, and to stick with this new story that you want to tell yourself. That's what authentic power is. It's kind of coming home and remembering to make the decision from that place that feels really powerful for yourself and overriding the conditioning that we have that's made us something that's not authentic to ourselves. When I talked about my story of feeling inadequate and that I was always going to struggle, I genuinely had this perception that because I didn't go to school, I wasn't going to get very far in life, and money was always going to be a struggle for me, and I was probably always going to work for someone else and not be super happy, but I needed to find the small moments in life that did make me happy. When I started working with this and creating identity, I called it the glass box. That I was always going to stay small and things were always going to be hard for me. And I was always going to stay in this place a struggle. When I lifted that glass box, I was able to realize like how much this was interwoven into my life and kind of everything that I was doing. That was extremely overwhelming for me. And I started to realize that I was making choices from this place that felt so belittling to who I am. And I had this perception of myself that things were always going to be hard. And that was okay. And I had normalized that. So when I started making decisions from a place of feeling capable or adequate and worthy of more, this authentic power started to show up and take the driver's seat. And every time I had to rewire my mindset around something, I had to stand in this authentic power. And I had to remember who I was without this conditioning. And that person does deserve a lot. That person can create their own reality. That person can put themselves out there and be something. And when I sat in this, I started realizing all the areas of my life that I felt so much more lit up about and passionate about. I felt this sense of relief that I am in control and I actually can create my own reality. My internal world is my external world. And when I started making that decision and coming from that place of power, my life started changing and shaping around me. And I started seeing potential everywhere. I started feeling confident. I started feeling into these parts of myself that I wanted to express, especially creatively. A lot of what I do comes from a creative aspect, and I didn't even know that that was an option for me. Creativity for me has been my light. And every time I'm creating whatever it may be, through knitting, through painting, through music, through meditation or fantasy or anything, I am remembering that this does exist for me and I can create this reality that I want. It's a choice. And it makes me feel really, really powerful. And it makes me feel abundant in all that surrounds me. I get to choose my friends. I get to choose what I want to do for a job. I get to choose how my finances are. I get to choose where I'm putting my energy and why. I stopped living for other people and suffering. Like this foot that I had on myself, like pushing me down, I released. And now I can see so much more potential in who I am as a person and where I want to be. I've done so much self-development in this area that it's feeling so hopeful. And even though this phase can be quite grueling and hard, it is so fun because you get to have the opportunity to decide who you are and what you want to do. When you can let go of making decisions for other people and start making decisions for yourself, you choose this authentic power over and over again. You get to be in reality with yourself. You're choosing what you surround yourself with. You're choosing the energy. Yes, we're human and things show up every day and we have to navigate our emotions and situations and life events. But it's choosing to deal with them from this place of power and authenticity and knowing that you're the one that's behind that decision and you're making decisions from your heart. Every time that you create the rewiring in your nervous system by choosing the heart-led decision that does feel in alignment, you're creating more and more safety. You are expanding your energy. You're expanding your capacity to hold and to put yourself out there. There will always be an edge that you're pushing. There will always be something that you're trying to do or to rewrite. But the more that you do it, the more that feels safe in the body to do and to make decisions from that area. This is our right and this is our choice. Everyone was raised with conditioning that is not theirs. That's normal. No one came out unscathed. Whether our parents did it with love or anger or worry. Maybe they were trying to heal their own relationship with how they grew up. We will always come out of it with conditioning that's not ours. And that's what this whole journey is about. It's about coming home to yourself and remembering who you are before that conditioning started. And you're right as a human being. And your birthright is abundance and living authentically to you. and not societal expectations. That might be hard for some people to digest. It might be hard for people to even consider could be their reality, but it's the truth. When you can step into this process with compassion and grace and ready to heal, you will start seeing your world reflect that. Choices will be made from a place of power, and it will have this ripple effect throughout your whole life and start feeling all the areas that starts changing. This journey takes time and it's not going to be fast. So have a lot of compassion for yourself and take the time to really journal through this. And I encourage you every time something feels tough or resistant to journal through it. What's coming up? What is it that you really want? What's the emotion coming up? Why you can't get there? And working through maybe where that story came from and choosing to start operating from this new place that feels more authentic to you. Could be really small, it could be really big. There were some days where nothing really happened for me, and then one day, boom, clarity came through on a situation where I started realizing why something was so hard for me. If it doesn't come up right away in journaling, that's okay, but it will come up. The more you start looking at it and removing yourself from the ego, the more truth will reveal itself to you and the clarity will set in. Thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it and you taking the time. If you're actively going through this right now, I'd love to support you the best that I can. Please reach out if you need any help in this area. I'd be more than happy to hold that space for you. I'm really excited to keep talking about this whole journey. The next episode, we'll be talking about reconnection to self and how you can fall in love with yourself again and finding out who you really are. I look forward to chatting more about all of this and really excited to where this whole series is going to take us together. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.